What if one quiet decision could shake the foundations of an entire continent? In a move that stunned world markets, Russia has announced a total halt of all metal exports to the European Union. There were no threats, no dramatic speeches, just a simple, legal declaration. Yet within hours, European industries were in crisis as prices for key metals like aluminum, nickel, and titanium shot up overnight. Factories in countries like Germany and France are scrambling, some forced to slow down or even halt production. These metals are not just commodities. They are the backbone of everything from airplanes and power grids to green technology and defense. Without them, entire sectors risk grinding to a halt. This was not a bombastic act of economic warfare, but a calculated demonstration of power. Western leaders and business executives are in a panic, searching for answers and alternatives. Emergency meetings are underway, but solutions are scarce. It is easy to underestimate how decisions taken far away can hit close to home. The jobs, savings, and future plans of millions now hang in the balance, all because of a single, silent switch flipped in Moscow. To understand how the fate of Europe came to depend so heavily on Russian metals, we need to look back at the chain of events that led to this moment of vulnerability. So, how did Europe become so reliant on Russian resources? And why was no one prepared for this crisis? Let's rewind and uncover the story behind this economic shock. Metals are more than commodities. They are the veins of modern industry. From bridges and airplanes to the growing world of renewable energy, metals like steel, aluminum, copper, titanium, and nickel shape the very skeleton of our economy. Every electric car, wind turbine, or data center needs these raw materials to exist. For decades, Europe quietly relied on a steady stream of Russian metals. As European mines closed and smelters downsized, the continent became more dependent on imports, especially from Moscow. Sanctions and quotas, meant to punish Russia and shift the balance, had the opposite effect. They made Europe even more reliant, shrinking domestic capacity just as global competition grew fiercer. It is tempting to think metals can be swapped like oil or gas. But, unlike energy, metals are not easily replaced or sourced elsewhere at scale. New mines take years to develop, and global reserves are limited or controlled by other rivals. When Russia shuts the export valve, there is no simple alternative. The supply chain for critical metals is not just long, it is fragile. Missing this context risks misunderstanding both the true gravity of the crisis and the limits of Western leverage. The West's economic power is only as strong as the resources it can secure. And right now, even the most advanced economies cannot function without Russian metals. But what exactly happened when Moscow finally turned off the tap? And why did the shockwaves hit so fast and so hard? Let's break down the sequence of events and uncover why Russia's quiet decision sent European industry into panic overnight. For decades, Europe set the rules. In a single day, those rules changed. The moment Moscow announced its export ban, prices for aluminum, nickel, and titanium soared to all-time highs. Stock markets shuddered, and a wave of panic swept through trading floors and boardrooms alike. In Germany and France, factories began shutting down production lines. Entire shifts stood idle, jobs vanished overnight, and the foundation of Europe's industrial engine started to crack. Aluminum for aircraft, nickel for batteries, titanium for engines. Suddenly, these critical resources were out of reach. Government officials scrambled into crisis meetings, while business leaders issued rare, blunt warnings. These metals are irreplaceable. Europe has no plan B. Decades of cost-cutting and deindustrialization meant there was simply nowhere to turn. This isn't just a supply headache. The risk is existential. Take away metals, and whole sectors, aviation, energy, automotive, could grind to a halt. That means not just delayed projects and missed profits, but a direct threat to millions of livelihoods and national economies. As Europe reeled, Russia moved swiftly. Instead of waiting for negotiations, Moscow redirected its exports eastward: Asia, Africa, the Middle East. New contracts were inked with China, India, and others, locking in both business and political influence for years to come. In the West, cries of blackmail echoed through parliaments and headlines. Yet the facts are cold. Russia broke no laws. It simply stopped playing by rules imposed from Brussels and Washington. Once, Europe called the shots. Now, it is left searching for answers, forced to confront just how deeply its fortunes depended on a single supplier whose patience has quietly run out. But with the old order shattered, what options does Europe have left, and how will this seismic shift reshape the balance of power worldwide? The world map is being redrawn, this time not by tanks, but by trade routes. In a single, silent move, Russia has done more to shift global power than decades of political speeches or military posturing. Suddenly, Europe finds itself not simply dealing with a temporary supply hiccup, but facing a true economic turning point, the kind that history books will remember. Efforts to quickly ramp up domestic metal production or find new, reliable suppliers will not fix things overnight. Building new mines, factories, and supply chains takes years, not months, and will cost tens of billions. Industry leaders warn that such delays are already bringing factories to a standstill across Germany, France, and beyond. Meanwhile, Russia is not waiting. It is forging new alliances across Asia, the Middle East, and even Turkey, sending metals once destined for Europe to eager buyers in China and India. These new trading corridors are not just rerouting cargo, they are redrawing the very rules of global industry and influence. Moscow's pivot eastwards is strengthening entire regional economies, weaving a web of dependency that leaves Europe increasingly isolated. For Europe, the stakes could not be higher. Green initiatives that promise to transform the continent, electric vehicles, wind turbines, and battery factories, now hang in the balance. Without key metals like nickel or aluminum, even basic industrial output and military readiness are suddenly at risk. The threat is not just lost profits, but lost leadership in the global race for innovation and energy transition. Every day that Europe hesitates means mounting losses, broken contracts, and a slow erosion of its influence on the world stage. What was once a position of industrial strength is now becoming a vulnerability as the rest of the world adapts and moves on. Is there any path out, or are we witnesses to a new world order, emerging not from conflict, but from economic leverage? The lessons of this seismic shift are only beginning to unfold. To understand how Europe might respond, and what options are left on the table, we need to dig deeper into the strategies and the hard choices that now face both sides. In this new world, flexibility and foresight are more precious than metal itself. The sudden halt of Russian metal exports is a wake-up call for everyone: businesses, governments, and individuals. Diversification of supply chains is no longer optional, but absolutely essential. Relying on a single source, no matter how reliable it once seemed, is a recipe for disaster. Countries must urgently rethink their industrial policies and invest in strategic sectors. This means supporting local mining, processing, and recycling industries, not just in words, but with real funding and action. Building true resilience will take years, but delay is no longer an option. For companies and individuals, agility and constant awareness will mean the difference between survival and collapse. Businesses need to map their risks, pivot quickly, and seek alternative suppliers, even if it comes at a higher cost. Workers and professionals must stay informed, ready to adapt their skills or shift industries as economic tides change. The era of taking resource security for granted is over. Every nation, every company, and every person needs to treat access to vital materials as a strategic priority, not a background assumption. What was invisible yesterday has become a central question for the future. Ignore these lessons, and the next shock could hit even harder, leaving entire economies and livelihoods exposed and unprepared. The stakes are too high for complacency. So as the world scrambles to adjust, the real contest is just beginning. Who will seize this moment to reinvent, and who will be left clinging to the past? power now belongs to those who can quietly say no. With a single, calm decision to halt metal exports, Russia has redrawn the map of global power, not with threats, but by simply closing a door. The shockwaves rolling through Europe show us that control is no longer in grand speeches or political alliances, but in the backbone materials that keep whole industries alive: steel, copper, aluminum, titanium, nickel. When Moscow said no, the silence was louder than any declaration. The risk here is real and immediate. Miss the shift in these new rules of power, and you risk far more than market losses. Whole nations could see industries stalled, jobs erased, and decades of progress lost, all because they misunderstood who truly holds the leverage. The West's old certainties have crumbled, replaced, almost overnight, by a world where access to resources sets the terms. That is the core insight. Control over resources now shapes destinies. Failing to recognize this could cost viewers, and entire countries, dearly in the years ahead. The ability to quietly say no is now more powerful than any headline or summit. So as you watch the world react, ask yourself, are you prepared for a future where the quietest decisions hold the greatest consequences?